Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Love That Loves You Back, a podcast between myself, Valerie and my dear friend Jonathan Fremantle. Uh, I'm an artistic miscreant, otherwise known as a self-described third-generation art professional, who's currently raising a fourth-generation art professional, uh, born in the depths of the Pale of Settlement in the former Soviet Union and partly raised in Australia, lived and worked in London and Paris, and 15 years ago, by a quirk of fate, relocated to Zimbabwe, where I'm the co-founder of First Floor Gallery Harare, trying to figure out life, education, art, and predominantly love of art as life goes on. And without further ado, over to Jonathan.
Thanks, Valerie. Yeah, Jonathan Fremantle. I grew up in Cape Town and studied in London. I did a long apprenticeship in fine art in the old sense, and have been more making art in one way or another ever since then. I live in Edinburgh now, but I also lived for a while in Johannesburg, where I had Hazard Gallery, and that was the context that I met Valerie about 10, 12 years ago, and just loved the conversation we had immediately about painting and how painting is everything. And that conversation's been a constant source of joy and sustenance over the years. So it does make sense that we share the conversation and look forward to where this goes.
Yeah, no, I mean, and it usually goes anywhere and everywhere, but somehow we always come back to art, and
Yeah,
because it is the love that loves us back. Thank you very
right.
much for joining us, and we look forward to sharing the journey. Hi, everybody, and welcome. I'm in Paris, so with Jonathan and I for once on the same continent, which is yeah. So we're both wearing jerseys.
That's a giveaway, yeah.
Yeah, that is a giveaway, and I'm feeling it in Paris, and I think this makes it more fun to have a reprise discussion, uh, uh which will probably be an ongoing series of conversations between artists about two sets of artists, and today we wanted to discuss uh Chaim Soutine and Cezanne. I mean, Chaim Soutine being my choice and Cezanne being Jonathan's choice. And so I'll just kick it off. I mean, it's really incredible to be able to talk about Soutine in Paris, because as a person who was also born in Minsk, I mean, I share like a huge affinity with Soutine because we're uh, both born within walking distance of each other, although let's just, I would just say he was born I think, in 1893. So, let's just say not quite a century apart, but quite some time distance apart. But I've always, even before finding out that we're born so, like so geographically proximately, I always felt this, this very emotional connection with his work. But and the more you research is where you realize his understanding or his passion for art history and the artists that he loved are also like his obsession with the Rembrandt and going to the Louvre and Rembrandt's sort of carcass. I mean, that happens to be my favorite painting at the Louvre as well. And I've always loved Soutine as a as an artist who, whose struggle, emotional and technical, and his conversation with life is so eminently expressed on the canvas, and the torture of making, making human pain visible and human fragility visible is so, it's almost, like when I speak about to artists about having blood on the canvas in terms of putting yourself, he's nothing but blood on the canvas. Like
Yeah.
Soutine is nothing but blood on the canvas. And to me, this kind of poignancy is always with, is with me and he's when I think about his work, when I look at his work, and the connection is with his work for me is extremely visceral, as is his life story, of
Mm.
the drama and the fact that his friendships are so eminently um I known, like his
Yeah.
closeness with Amedeo Modigliani is to me is extraordinary. It's two artists, huddling for more in the garrets of Montparnasse is just is sensational. And and I often think what we will look at, looking backwards, say on our lives, how will the relationships that we have and the artists that we work with now will ultimately become legendary in some ways. And this is how history is written.
Mm.
You know, where the personality of the artist in some way is so deeply entwined with his practice, which is not necessarily common in some ways.
Yeah. Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
and I just, to me, he's, yeah, one of my most cherished and beloved painters, and also as a painter's painter as well, because he's,
Mm.
the materiality of his approach to paint eh, is so there. It's again, it's so visceral. It's so, tactile. That it's kind of, for me, he's everything, really. It's
Mm.
in that sense. He's because from him, I think the trajectory to Rothko is kind of
Mm.
weirdly almost direct. You know,
Mm.
I don't,
The
like, if you
balance,
think about it.
especially. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and I haven't really articulated that before, but I think I think for me that kind
There's
of.
definitely something there. The Soutine's work, even though the language is what we know, a still life, there's Corot, and then we go further back to Dutch painting. And so that's a collection of humble things, carcasses of animals from the butcher, or a fish hanging, as it would in a fishmonger's. And so we're sort of familiar with what we're looking at, and yet he adds so many layers of humanity to it. So you're looking at this dead carcass, and yet you feel as if you know it intimately. It's like your friend. And I think there's an intensity of you say blood on the canvas. I think that's also another way of saying commitment.
Mm.
That the brushstrokes have a they're both searching, because he's clearly really burning with the desire to depict what he's seeing, but they're also kind of um, uh, have such authority at the same time, so you don't feel like they're a kind of a posit for something else. The painting is the thing,
Yeah,
it's
oh,
it's
the
not a,
painting
it's
is
not
the
a
thing.
remnant of a thing. It's the thing itself. Yeah.
And also the commitment. I mean, in that sense, there's also the commitment of painting the common person in the way that we see, that is also
Yeah.
has a trajectory to Manet and Goya, where you take the ordinary and you amplify the ordinary person. But what he does in his work is, and I'm really interested in the idea of seeing the beauty in the very ugly, that he
Yeah.
manages to, in fact, makes the ordinary and the ugly, or sort of the not necessarily the ugliness of life, but the people's poverty and personal struggle somehow holy, right? There is this an element of sacredness there that is really palpable, is that he wants us to feel that he has chosen people to paint, and he senses their spiritual, aspirations, in that, no matter who they are, whether they're the bellboy and or the cook, you know, their humanity and their, you know, spirituality is, you know, is sacredly in that as well, which you know, which makes him kind of one of the ultimate painters. And that's, you know, this is, you know, and I'll just sort of add the anecdote, like speaking of blood on the canvas, is that he would he had blood in the studio because you would drag in carcasses into
Mm.
his studio, and the story goes is that because they were all sharing studios in this building in Montparnasse, and Chagall saw blood sort of streaming out from under the door of Soutine's studio, and they ran past screaming, somebody killed Soutine. And, you know, he said, how, you know, it's just because he had no regard for,
Yeah.
like, for hygiene or anything like that, which I think, you know, you know, in that sense, is somebody who was lost in his dedication to his practice. Like, it just didn't care, you know, which I think
No.
is, you know,
He probably also suffered and in some ways benefited from being such an outsider in Paris. You know, there were these, he had a couple of close friends in this artistic community, but in many ways those friends were also
mm,
outsiders. You know, they were in some way, whether it's religiously or culturally or just, you know, through poverty, they were kind of on the margin of what was going on. And so there's something heroic about these
mm,
people that made work in the face of an incredible mountain of physical and psychological strife. Um, and so the work, and I do think that adds extra heroism to it. You know, they feel like if this was the last, I sometimes think that, you know, if I'm feeling a bit floppy, you know, in front of the canvas and uncommitted, I try and think that this could be the last thing you ever paint, you know, and if it is, you know, Jesus, you better
yeah, you better you
up.
better you better do it.
Better
That's a
turn
very
up
hard
because
thing to scare
the
yourself with.
narrative is that it maybe it is your last, and then, you know, look at Van Gogh's last painting. That's an absolute banger with the circling crows in the field,
Oh
and
yeah,
uh,
yeah, no,
and it has a, well, we know what happened
yeah.
next, but you don't want to do an average painting as your
It's your
last.
last way. I
And
mean,
his
I did.
paintings are all, every single one, you could say this is a lot, this is good enough for a last painting.
Well, Soutine died at the age of 50, which is like from an
That's
ulcer. So
late.
he would
Yeah.
have suffered. I mean, yeah, I mean, he was not a healthy guy. I think, you know, the suffering and like it impacted impacted on his health as well. I mean, I mean, there's also that sort of issue of artists, at what stage do they, you know, how much work do you have in you, you know,
Yeah.
and the you somehow, or your soul, your spirit, your body is kind of
Mm.
born programmed to know how much stuff you have in it and to give, and then and how much time you have, you know, and then like we can go
Yeah.
to Basquiat, who managed to produce like 2000 works before the age of 28, which is basically impossible,
Yeah.
right? So, and most of them in the last 4 years. So that kind of sense
Yeah.
of urgency in producing work, which I guess in the world today, I mean, you know, it's very difficult to appreciate that in the moment, and
Mm.
especially in the kind of market environment that we subsist. I mean, and I was just, you know, here for the art fairs, and it's you know, it's a very detached environment where, which is, you know, the art fairs are 100% not about art, and it's, you know, you have the sense of production. What is production today? What is innovation today? You know, it's sort of, what is the state of the market? I was at, and I'll just mention it because it's timely, but walking into Art Basel at the Grand Palais, you know, the first work that jumped out at me was fresh as a daisy, you know, beautiful, poignant, as relevant as possible. And it was a Willem de Kooning. And I thought, this can't be a thing, that de Kooning
Yeah.
looks so
Feels
today,
vibrant. Yeah.
so vibrant, so like of the moment, and without losing any sense of relevance. And then there were some amazing Egon Schiele drawings, and those were the things that and some Wilfredo Lam, and I was like, those are the things that stand out for me.
Mm.
Uh, in the, 2024
I'm
sort of
sure Soutine would wipe the floor of tiny
totally,
pictures in there.
totally. And that for me was kind of tragic, although it made me feel like a reactionary fuddy-duddy,
I
but
wonder if there's something in, I mean, we're to segue Cezanne neatly into
mm,
it. He said, I can't remember, I'm paraphrasing, but I'm going to change the world with an apple, something like that, and if he was a real, a kind of patron saint of the ordinary, painting the ordinary or recognizing the most intimate connection is possible with the most ordinary thing, whether it's an apple or a mountain that you spend all your time painting. And the purity of that, so the purity of it, of the ego dissolving, and B, the kind of purity of um, recognizing that your subject is really just a portal and it's the painting. You're making a painting, and the painting itself has its own sacredness. And so if you're absorbed in a kind of whatever popular political trend or issue is circling at that time, you kind of miss the opportunity to go through it, and it becomes your paintings are a wall, not a window. They
no,
they sit
uh,
they sit as a kind of comment, but they don't offer any possibility of transformation.
no, and or
Cezanne
agency
has that.
to
Yeah,
the view. I was just wondering while you were talking whether or not we know whether this is, because it sounds very Buddhist,
yeah,
what you're saying, that
that
whole
philosophy.
concept
Yeah,
of practice and process, and
I
being
know
invested
he
in the
he was
small
like he was very Catholic, like he was devoutly Catholic, but he was also kind of. I've just been reading his letters, so and
things.
it's been really illuminating. He's mostly writing to his artist friends and writers, like Pizarro and Monet and Emile Zola, his
Yeah,
childhood friend. He writes to him a lot. Mostly writing to Emile saying thanks and could you maybe send me some more money?
yeah, yeah. That would have been
Um,
the usual.
that's, I mean, it really
Gosh,
is refreshingly a lot of him saying, "I'm running out of cash. My dad won't give me any. Can you help me out?" And really, the feeling you get is that no one really wanted him to paint apart from a few people. Um, but I treated myself because it's a real volume. A couple of days ago, I was in bed in the morning. I woke up and I thought, I'm just going to skip to the end. I'm going to read this last three letters. What are they? What's he saying at the very end? And his penultimate letter is to his son Paul, and this is 7 days before he dies, and he's saying, um, "I'm, I'll get it up because it's actually really it, it's yeah it's so he said second from last ever painting a letter to his dad. Anyway, he's saying more or less, I'm getting close. I'm finally getting there. I've been trying all my life to and relying, he uses the word sensations and trusting the body's sensations. And I'm finally getting there. I'm getting something.
oh wow.
And then he said, and that'll teach this guy. There's obviously someone who remains unnamed because it's in brackets. Um, that the imposters, I'll just forget about them because they don't even know what I'm doing. And most of my compatriots are assholes.
He's
And
letting loose.
yeah, but he really he's just offering a glimmer to his son, saying, "Look, I think I'm there. I've almost got there." And then his last letter, which is 5 days before he dies, is to his paint merchant, saying, "I ordered seven tubes of red lake. Where are they? It's urgent."
It is
And
urgent. Wow.
that's his last letter is to his paint merchant. And there's something incredibly, you talk about having a certain amount of paintings in you. I think it's to do with that search for the external measuring up to whatever's going on internally. You know, that vision you have, that ability to kind of, Cezanne talks about my favorite quote of his, where he says to Zola, I'm trying to paint the hovering universe, the tentativeness of things. And
That's
his use
amazing.
of the word sensations. So it's as if his body is a kind of tuning fork,
Mm.
and that tuning fork is tuning into this resonating, pulsating rhythm that to most people is invisible because they're not in tune. And that the act of painting is a kind of um, meditation in order to connect this body to that resonance that's universal. And so I understand that the measurement's so precise. You know, he's not saying I did a good painting, I did a bad painting. He's saying the sensation is almost there, you know.
Yeah. No, I get
And
it. It's like tuning a fork, like a,
yeah,
like a tuning fork,
that's
right?
it. And you're just kind of waiting and waiting. And so his legacy, and I guess that's why many painters now, and I think for many millennia beyond, will look at his work and they may not want to paint like him, but they'll look at him like some kind of father figure, um, because his painting, you can dissect them as if they're a thesis on making a connection. Um, they're just sublime in that way, and even in the way that they stop. You know, he's not. There's points where he's not covering the whole surface, and so you start to be aware of what those empty spaces mean. And I think they mean more than just a kind of pictorial meaning. They have a meaning in terms of that resonance and that sensation. Um, yeah. And in many ways, the most different to Satine, you know, he grew up with a affluent father in the south of France, and but his struggle was to he also had no one, his family didn't support him being an artist, and his father was he was constantly having to fight and deceive his father and fight him and create tricks and sort of illusions. He didn't even tell him that he was married for about 10 years because he knew that his father would cut him off and then he couldn't keep painting. So he had to keep his wife in secret in Paris, and Zola would pay the rent. And then he would say, "Oh, I'm just going to visit Paris," and then he'd go and, you know, see his wife. So he had this incredible like struggle to just be himself. Um, and I think I think the solace that he found in painting and in nature is the kind of gift that he leaves for everyone. It's this profound body of work. Yeah.
But it makes me think whether or not the personal project of the artist is often, and I always talk about it, the personal process and the
Yeah.
project of the artist doesn't have to have anything to do with the what happens to the work once it's out there, or
Mm.
the experience of the work that other people have in it, because that's a very private project, and also
Yeah.
its outcomes for the artist don't have to match the most successful, like, or match the idea of what is the most successful work, as judged even by art history, sort of, or anyone else, because it's a personal project, and with very discrete parameters that are like private to the artist, and they don't have to, and the artist shouldn't even have to account for, I mean, the uh
Sure.
and I think it's important to give to the artist that privacy, and the vehemence of their project, and so it's almost where death of the author makes a lot of sense, in a sense that what the artist is trying to achieve doesn't have to correspond to anything that anyone else gets out of the work ultimately, and just because we say that this is the most famous or the most successful or the most
Mm.
historically important work, it's reminds me of, what is it, Bizet's Carmen, like the opera, he wrote it in 2 weeks, and and he was deeply disappointed and angry that that became his most successful work because he
Yeah.
spent the least amount of time on it, and in fact that he spent, he devoted himself to making the pearl fishes, which is lesser known. It's a much more like a bigger work. And he was deeply frustrated that and hated the fact that Carmen became this
This
because
big
that wasn't
thing. Yeah.
his thing. So and we should allow, but I think again, we're in this moment where we're not giving that space for there to be a gap and a legitimate gap between the artist and the audience that gets filled
Mm.
in by history and space and time, which is, and it has its own life, which I think uh, we're just not in a healthy space right now. I
Do you
feel.
think, I just a genuine question, do you think that there's a lot of narrative around work? You make a painting, it ends up in an art fair. By the time it's got to that art fair, you know, this is assuming that it's gone through your Instagram and through the gallery's Instagram and the gallery's PDF and then et cetera, et cetera. So by the time it arrives at this fair or wherever it is, it's picked up so much noise, and so much narrative and in many ways, and the narrative is generally around selling the thing. It's a kind of supporting document for it to be an object, and it's almost like that kind of ballast is what's
Mm.
becomes the work, and the work almost dissolves away from it. I
Well,
don't
I
know what
mean,
you
it sort
think.
of reduces the work to illustration. Like I was at an art fair
Yeah,
and the artist was there and she's saying, "Oh, it's about the first rain." And I was like, "I don't care. I don't care what the work is
doesn't
about." I
matter. Yeah,
mean, I really like, I mean, it's okay, you tell me, but like it makes
mm,
absolutely of zero difference to me because I will never know what you've invested in it. It's like it's not my experience, and I'm seeing that it's like it's very
yeah,
pink, for instance, which it was. And I'm like, okay. I mean, I'm thinking, is it a successful painting? Does it do
yeah,
something for me? Do I feel anything? Or, an article or post by Kenny Schachter's restating the absolute obvious is that, art critics make zero difference anymore. We don't have any art critics that are capable of making careers. And so, and they've made connoisseurship a dirty word, but in fact, what we mean by connoisseurship is actually an expertise and understanding of the weight of history, and that art to be what will make an important artwork is something that is able to withstand the weight of time and history, and the only way that it can do it is if it connects to humanity in really important ways. And that is not to say that past critics of the past or the art world was highly segmented, very sexist, very male driven. But at the same time, that is also not to say that, it's like throwing out the baby with the bathwater to suggest that anything can be art and nothing, it's a free
yeah,
for all, that because it's not a free for all. I mean, it can be a free for everyone to engage with in terms of inclusivity, but not in terms of merit, because the idea that there is the art exists beyond description, beyond text, is
yeah,
inevitable. And it's a very simple comparison that I make to people, is that no one demands a text to support a song, or
yeah,
any piece of music. We don't require music to be, for the musician to say, well, this song is in fact about this. No one asks them, well, where's your social consciousness on that, blah, blah, blah. They say it's either a hit or it's not a hit. And we all recognize that, a
mm,
song can be absolutely about nothing and still be a resounding hit, and that's okay, right? This because it taps into
yeah.
something. And once you make that paradigm for people, make that analogy, people usually recognize that they're making an unreasonable demand on visual art, the type of demand that they don't have of music. And and you have to sort of wonder why. Maybe it's a price point. We don't know.
Because yeah, I think also your music analogy is beautiful, and it has an extra layer to it where you you're we've all heard an incredible voice singing a incredibly ordinary song, if you know what I mean. And that in the way they deliver it, I've got many coming into my head right now, but in the way they sing that simple song, it could be Ave Verum by Mozart. You know, it has this incredible singularity and sacredness to it, and that's in the delivery. That's in that Cezanne's resonance thing. You know, where that simple delivery, that pure delivery, the kind of the piece of art is whether it's singing about an apple or the highest, most sacred thing, whatever. It the communication is on another level. It's not subject related. Um, and yeah, it's so true. It's an interesting. I wonder what happens when this when we break it. You know, if you know what I mean. If the system itself is so overladen by 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 this kind of problem, is there some, will it break? You know, does it, can it break? Or is it just,
I think at a certain point it is breaking because it's not, I don't think it's sustainable anymore because
yeah.
it's because but also I mean, and this is my faith in art really, is that I think it's a self-perfecting system where people who engage with art you know, even if they engage with poor motivations or you know with a measure of ignorance, ultimately the more they spend time with it, it has this you know, if there is enough exposure to good things, they will kind of get there, you know. The
Mm,
mountain is high, the roads are many and arduous, but they kind of you will get there. That's kind of my faith that
mm,
you know you it is possible. It might take people longer, right? Because but they will become disenchanted with things that don't nourish their soul when they
yeah.
learn to learn to be more demanding of themselves than of the artwork. And also because you know the market has has become so superficial in the absence of people who know genuinely know and understand history. Like right now there is and this was very manifest at the fairs, like, oh,
Mm,
surrealism is having a moment. This is so insane, you know, that young artists are reinventing surrealism like as though it never happened before, right? But also with much poorer technical skills, like way poorer technical
yeah.
skills. And you just wonder, you have access to better materials, better technology. Like I've seen works that have you know, such like zero, like it's obvious that no one teaches anatomy anymore. And then if you want to represent the human figure, if you distort it, that's fine deliberately. But if you just, if you just do
Can't
it
paint
really
it.
badly, that's just not a thing. And no one seems to query that because we're also have so many people in the market. You know, I went to an unfortunate show where I think the most, you know, we're supposed to gain meaning from a video of a very, you know, navel-gazing young woman who's just with a, you know, very pained, entitled expression talking about her, you know, completely, I don't know, very irrelevant kind of problems, but looking very sort of,
Mm,
you know, pale and long-haired and very bohemian and tortured, you know, and
mm,
special. And, but the work was just completely superficial. And I was like, the work is just not up to scratch. And everyone's jumping up and down and, you know, seduced by technique because it's, you know, the paint is so smooth, you know. So
mm.
we're, and, you know, this kind of neatly brings us to two painters back to uh,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
painters who
sure.
just didn't give a fuck about,
Mm,
you know, the sort of the seduction of technique that everyone's preoccupied with, who are ranting
yeah.
and raving about against the idea of, you know, painting being the thing. And so, which
It's a,
again, forgotten
it's
about.
definitely not, it's a really beautiful point because 100% Soutine and Cezanne were, they got painting and they, you can clearly see in the references they make, Soutine's with Rembrandt and so on, and Cezanne, who looked at Titian, and he looked at many other painters, but he was a classical painter in his mind, but he wasn't interested in doing reproductions. So they're painting what's in front of them.